When Bill Holderman and Erin Simms each sent their mothers the novel 50 Shades of Grey for Mother's Day, they uncovered a nugget of a great screenplay. The first book club came out in 2018, and this married writer-director duo found a new journey together that has changed the course of their careers. Today, Erin and Bill sit down with us and talked all things relationships, learning on the job, saying yes to luck, and what happens when you put Jane Fonda, Mary Steenburgen, Diane Keaton, and Candice Bergen in not just one movie, but two. Happy listening.
I'd love to kind of kick off and just have both of you kind of tell your stories and a little bit about you, and then we can kind of dive into the book club in due course.
Love it.
Okay, well, I guess I'm from Montreal, and I started out as an actress, which at the time was, there was not a common thing here. There was like two of us in the city that were auditioning for things. And I guess this American show had come here, and it was called Student Bodies, and I ended up getting one of the recurring roles. And so that was really what I was doing, and moved to LA and was acting there as well. And then at some point just kind of fell out of love with acting, oddly. Like it was going pretty well, and I just would find myself, I just remember like being in the trailer and being like incredibly bored. And of course this is pre-internet, and I was young, and I'm sure I could have been doing other things while I was sitting around and waiting for 14 hours, but suddenly realized like I wanted to be on set. I wanted to be more involved. This just wasn't quite right. So after a very long journey, I ended up deciding to just start back at scratch. And I was literally a PA, which is, somebody who like stands around guarding trucks on a movie set. I was a locations PA. And I remember I was guarding a truck actually on a set in Vancouver. And somebody said to me, weren't you on Student Bodies? And they were like 18. I was like, yes, I was. So next thing I knew, I was like answering Craigslist ads. I mean, it's crazy to say. Yeah. And I got a job as an assistant to a director, and then, didn't know what the hell I was doing, but did it. And next thing I knew, I got an interview for a Robert Redford movie. And Bill was producing the movie. He had been working with Redford. He'll tell you about that after. And I got hired to be Redford's assistant, and he was directing and acting and producing. And I just couldn't even believe that I had gotten this job. So for 4 months, I sort of told my friends, like, you're not going to hear from me. Don't just like forget my name, because this is like the greatest opportunity I've ever gotten. And by the end, I sort of said, hey, I kind of have more experience than just being an assistant. I actually had worked at some production companies. I've read scripts. I used to be an actress. And so they ended up offering me a job in development at their company in LA, because they had just fired somebody. So I moved to LA, worked in development, learned how movies get put together, learned how to read a script, learned how to pick material, all of the things. Bill actually really was incredibly helpful in mentoring me, because he had been in the business for a while. And we worked at Redford, so we were always thinking about ideas for older people, and cut to the idea for book club, which came because Bill sent his mother 50 Shades of Grey for Mother's Day, and I thought he was insane. And then I thought it was hysterical, so I sent it to my mom and my stepmom, and then the next day we had the idea for the movie, and that is how it happened. But, the story really starts with just go back to the beginning, after having already been at the top, I guess, as an actress. At the top, like as a childhood kind of whatever actress.
That's such a good story.
It is a good story. Huh? I really wrapped that up.
That was a good story. I was like, that was a succinct 2-minute elevator pitch, really well.
I like that. You're gonna quickly realize Erin's better at pitching.
No.
So I'm from Chicago and went to college, and I did not know what I wanted to do. And graduated from Northwestern with a communications and economics degree. Did not go to film school.
Interesting.
Yes. And did take a couple of electives when I was there. We also, while I was there, me and some friends made the first ever in the country, fully student run, fully student produced, fully student acted, fully everything soap opera. And that we ran for 2 years, called University Place. I was actually an actor in it, which is hilarious.
I was actually a really good actor.
Not at all. Terrible. And the people that created it were really smart, except for in casting. And so got a little bit of the bug, moved out to Los Angeles with a group of friends from school, just to give it a whirl. I think everyone else was moving East Coast and going into finance, and that was very unappealing to me back,
Yeah.
all these years ago. Still is pretty unappealing. No offense to all the one or two
financial people out there.
Yeah, and in the process, got sort of hooked. And it felt like it was something that was completely unattainable. But the reason why it felt only like a modicum of attainability was when I was at Northwestern, I worked for a professor. I was his teaching assistant for a couple of years, and his son was a writer on Friends. And this is at the height of Friends. And so it was this moment where this is how naive I was. My whole family's in law, and I knew I did not want to do law. But I never even considered that television was written. I mean, it's really embarrassing, but I was like, wait, so I met him. He came in to talk to the class, and I took him out for a coffee afterwards. I'm like, wait a minute, and I loved the show. Friends it was one of those moments where, we had the Thursday night, like our entire dorm would come together and watch.
Watching parties.
We have watching parties. And I don't even know how but like at universities, like we would get like popcorn and like soda and like or pizza. It was amazing every Thursday night. But so I was out with him, and I said, I honestly cannot believe like this is a thing that you get to do. Like you get to like write for these characters, and that was it. And I was like, that feels really interesting. So that was the first little dose of like, wow, this is something. There's a whole other world out there that I want to go explore. And so some friends and I decided, and it was right when the internet was kind of like taking hold, and we thought, hey, maybe we can skirt some of the obstacles and just create stuff just right for online, and do like, we actually were trying to create branded entertainment shows. Didn't deliver them. And so then the bottom completely fell out. There was a huge crash in the market, in the late 90s, early 2000s. And I couldn't believe that could happen. Again, it's very naive. There's a trend. And during that, I was like, well, I have to go do something really traditional. I have to do something that's like stable and like safe, because I can't have this volatility. And I was like, what's stable and safe? And I thought, the film business seems stable and safe, which is the dumbest thing. One of the dumbest thoughts, but that's what I thought. And who's a stable, safe, in the film business? And it was, Robert Redford. And so I went and interviewed for a job. A friend of mine knew that there was an open position. I went and interviewed. And I remember I went through like the series of interviews with a few of the people. And I remember in the final interview, they said, will you give us a 1-year commitment? Because I was just going to be an assistant. Yeah. And I said, absolutely not. Like, there's no chance I can commit a full year. Like, I'm going places. I am not going to do this for a year. I'm sorry. And they were like, okay, well, they still offered me the job. Cut to, I was at the company for almost 14 years. And it was at a time where, before my 14-year run, the longest, I think, other than his personal assistant, the longest anyone was there running the company was 6. So Redford and I had a very long run. It was a tricky moment because film was changing so much. His career was changing so much, but it was great. It was a great learning ground because I got to not only work with an actor, so I saw it from that point of view. I got to work with a director. I got to work with someone who's running a company. And then I also got the experience of being able to go to Sundance and see the world of independent film, from the ground floor. And so the experience in totality was incredible.
And you went from being a gopher to running the company. So
which was nice too. And the way that happened was honestly through writing. So every time there was a project that we couldn't get financed, I would write a draft. And I had a good track record for a moment where I would come in and I would do a rewrite. This was before I was in the guild. Hate to say it, did a bunch of free work, but that's part of the world. And so I took some projects that were stagnant and weren't going to go anywhere, that had, a lot of money against them, and got them to a place where, actors wanted to be in them or filmmakers wanted to make them. And for me, it was a way to get projects made because I just wanted to go produce movies. And so I did that on a few movies, and it just got the company going in a good way and got him excited again about some things. And that got me really excited about writing.
And of course, I came in as the shit disturber that was like, wait a minute, why don't you just write a movie yourself instead of rewriting and getting no credit? And it's like, what are you doing? So that's where I came into.
Yeah, and that's it. And then, just kept writing and kept wanting to make movies. And so still in that place of trying to write and make movies.
Yeah.
So in terms of, you both started it obviously more indie, will give or take your acting phase. But, what was it like writing the book? Like, did you know, like in your gut that the book club was going to, especially with this talent attached, that it was going to become what it did?
Well, we have slightly differing. I never imagined that it was going to be as big as it was. Like that. Okay. That was a surprise. I cannot say like with honesty that like, I knew exactly. But I did know based on a couple other movies that I'd worked on, and just from a sense that if we did our jobs well, I felt there was really an audience that was going to show up. And I felt that in my bones. And Erin, to her credit, was even more bullish. She was like, no, this is going to be huge.
I thought it was going to be like $100 million movie.
She was right.
People thought I was insane.
Yeah.
It's like the characters you developed are just so relatable. It's like you can see your mom, your grandma, your friends. You can see everybody in them. It's like, so there's when you touch on the mass audience of women, it's very relatable. It's like that hits the spectrum of the audience of moviegoers.
But it's also, it was right from the idea. Like the one sentence log line, I knew and by the way, it's a curse also, because once you have an idea that's so, the minute you say it's 4 older women reading 50 Shades of Grey, everybody just starts laughing, right? So you don't even have to pitch it at that point because you get it. And if an idea is so easy to understand what you're about to sort of feel and see, I think you've got a hit movie right from that point. And I say it's a curse because now, like, until we have an idea that is that good again, we know it's not going to be as good as that idea. So it's like, thank God it happened. But
the thing that's interesting though, because in hindsight, it feels like, oh, that's a no-brainer, right? And but we were in several rooms that we would pitch it, and they would say, okay, we think that's really interesting, but we don't think you should use 50 Shades of Grey. Like, I'm not going to throw I'm not going to throw anyone under the bus, but there are executives, and they know who they are, that said, oh, that's really funny, but I don't think you should use 50 Shades of Grey, or, oh, that's really great. I mean, very publicly, we've said, we were told, cast it in a totally different way. Can you please cast it under 50? Like, maybe it's more interesting if they're in their 40s.
I don't think we need to hide the fact that we first sold this movie to Harvey Weinstein, and he asked us to cast younger, and we were like,
but even before we did that, there were a couple companies that, I remember someone with a very appealing offer was like, yeah, but we just don't think 50 Shades is the right.
I remember that meeting. And basically it was like, you instantly knew this person didn't get it at all, because they were missing like the actual hook of why it was going to be.
That happened 2 back-to-back meetings, and we looked at each other. We were like, zero chance. Like, we're not doing that. We're not going to do a diluted, like, weird version of this. Like, we're going for it.
But again, like the original question you asked was it fun to write? It was so much fun to write. That was,
was that the question?
Yes. It was so much fun to write because we had been looking at movies, we'd been watching like Best Exotic Marigold and just like talking about that sort of movies with people that age. And I was talking about how I'm obsessed with Diane Keaton and I'm obsessed with Jane Fonda. And it was just like, it literally was just people that we wish could be in a movie together and had never been in a movie together. And so it was just, we were writing the Diane character for Diane Keaton, but like on a fantasy level. And then we were writing the Jane for Jane on a fantasy level. So there was no pressure. We didn't have a deal yet. We were writing it for free ourselves. And we were just having a great time, just without any outside pressure. But eventually,
day like? What was that first day like of just sitting down and write? Like, did it just like flow, or did you, like, what do you remember the first day you both sat down and started drafting this?
Yeah, well, I mean, I remember the first day that we sat down and we started outlining it, and it was one of those. Those are great days when it's like kinetic and there's just ideas flowing and you just feel good. And you're like, what about this? What about this? And they all feel at that point too. There's no shape or structure. There's no architecture yet, so everything's a possibility. But I think very quickly we started to sort of find these archetype characters that we really wanted to make sure. I mean, to your point, and thank you for the compliment. It's like we really wanted them to feel real and relatable. Yeah. And the way we did that was we were talking about real, related. Like for us, it's like probably on some level, those people are torn from real human experiences that we've either had, that we've seen people have in a really, in a close way. And so I don't know, those first days were really amazing. And then I remember actually after we had our outline, when we first went to final draft, and it was one of those moments too, where because we were writing a comedy, which is, it's a lot of fun. It's like, you do end up writing more than what gets saved. Right. So, but it was pretty high productivity.
Also, it's like everything. Your first time can only be your first time. The innocence, the naivete, the like fantasizing, the not knowing how hard it is to write a movie, not having any awareness of that, because I guess it was the first time first time you started from absolute scratch, maybe on a movie?
Absolutely not.
Okay, absolutely not.
But there was a naivete in the sense that like the experience that I'd had up to that point, having written a few movies that had gotten made, it felt like the tangibility of it was there, but also the freedom to not be, I wasn't doing a rewrite because some actor didn't want to do XYZ and we were trying to write it into some location. It was like, there was a real freedom to the canvas. The canvas was incredibly pure, which is great.
Very fun.
Yeah.
So we had 5 characters at first, just for the record.
Yeah, we had to kill one.
We had like a Michelle Pfeiffer.
Oh, wow. Okay. In terms of the women that you've written, because all 4 of them have such distinct characters, did you take experiences, since you both sent your mom, and your stepmom copies of the book? Are there are there real life, did you put them into these characters in a certain sense? Because
100%. The Jane Fonda character is definitely, when I say based on, I mean just certain aspects on Bill's mom.
Yeah.
I mean, Bill's mom is the whole reason, and him sending her 50 Shades of Grey is the whole reason why the conversation started, because his mom at the time was like dating and didn't get, completely confident, rolling around in a mini skirt at like 70, whatever. I actually know she won't tell me how old she is. And I was just blown away that was even a thing, that it was a possibility, because my mom was so different. And so, so Jane Fonda's was inspired by Bill's mom, who also was like a baller kind of working woman, running her own business, successful.
Wildly independent woman who was not going to be tied down, unless it's in a sexual manner, by a man.
See how wrong? This is the experience.
Okay, sorry.
Very
sorry,
wrong.
Mom.
Very wrong. And then the Candace character, Sharon, is based on my mom, because she was kind of at the time, like, at home watching TiVo or whatever it was at the time.
Oh my God, yes.
And not dating and sort of thinking like it was over. And so I really wanted to inspire her and to rethink things. And Candace is a federal judge because Bill's dad was a federal judge. So we took that experience and mixed it in with Candace. Originally that wasn't there, but we put that in later. And then Mary's character, Carol, is based on my stepmother, who's been married for 1,000 years and happy-go-lucky and doesn't, very opposite from my mom as well. Okay. And so we just thought, this is really interesting, like that you could all be the same age and you could all have the same opportunities and be coming at life so differently. So I think that's that's representative of all of how we really are. It's like, you know, your best friends, even, like, you just live life so differently, and it's interesting to put that together. So
yeah, we really liked the idea too, from a relationship standpoint, making sure that there was enough variety that everyone, it was a very real situation in that not everyone's happily married or in a
Yeah.
long-term marriage. Not everyone's divorced. Not everyone's wanting to be in a relationship. Some people are. I mean, with the Diane character as well, it's like we had someone who was in a slightly different phase of life where she was just a relationship, long-term relationship ended, but maybe it wasn't the thing that was as satisfying as it may have appeared to the outside world. And I think part of that journey was, how do we cover all of these different places that people can be in their romantic relationships, and then let the friendship of the four be this sort of central support that can support all of those things. It's not pushing anyone to be something else. It's supporting everyone in their own journey, for lack of a less.
And Diane wasn't based
term.
on anyone, but she was based on things that we had heard.
Yeah.
I mean, I just think there's a lot of people that are married and, like, let's just say miserable for like at least a decade. You know, they eventually break up and they're like, well, we've been unhappy for, 15
Forever.
years. And so forever. Yeah. And I was really intrigued by that character that we were writing for. So she, in a sense, the Diane character really was the heart of the movie, because that felt like something really possibly universal that nobody really talks about.
No, 100%. It's like, I think they all hit a nail for everybody on the head, in terms of where you can relate the stories you've said, the friendships you've had. It's like, I think the first book club, at least from my perspective, was very much about more of their individual journeys and how they had this camaraderie. And the second one, watching it, was much more about their friendship. It was much more about them being real with each other, like their real talk when they're all sitting around the jail, or, they're helping them get through their fears and push through that. So the evolution of the storylines and their relationships, as well as their own personal journeys, you really, in terms of what their phases went through, was really, it struck chords, even at my age, because I can relate to the daughters and I can relate, and then you see your parents dating and you're like, wait a minute. It's not something you think that you're going to have to see, and it's very odd in some ways, but at the same time, you're like, oh no, I can relate to that daughter wanting to watch over the parent.
Yeah, it is interesting. I think there's a real, culturally and societally, we really believe that at a certain point we become adults, or we understand, and we know what's going on, and we know how to behave, and we're going to graduate into this pool of just we have it all figured out, and it doesn't exist. But it's this sense that we all have that oh, well, our parents have it figured out. It's no, they don't.
No.
And they have the same heartbreak and ambition and challenge and love. It's they have all of the human experience does not disappear when you hit a certain age. In fact, it continues to evolve, and you gain wisdom through the experience you've had, but you're still, it's all of those things are still there if you want them to be. And I think that was something that we were hearing a lot, and obviously working for an older actor who was dealing with things from a professional standpoint, where it's wait a minute, I'm still relevant. Why am I being sort of put in a box of not existing? It's and so it was, I don't know, that foundational thought of these people are all going through things that, we might go through in our 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, but they don't ever go away.
It's underrepresentation in a way, and it's so interesting because even when, if you think about even the new Sex and the City, right? It's if you think of our generation, because I'm assuming we're about similar ages, the Golden Girls were crazy old to us. They painted them living in Boca under a house with and then you look at it and they're the same age as the Sex and the City characters in terms of how the roles have been cast. That's wild to me, that the perception of culture growing up in the 80s and 90s where the Golden Girls were 50 and that was so old. And then you look at how 50, it's this weird juxtaposition in terms of of the ageism that exists.
But I mean, it's also because of, the costumes, the hair. Yeah. Nobody loves Golden Girls more than me. I mean, if you try to compare the way that the Golden Girls look versus the way the Sex and the City girls look, there is no comparison. 50, there's a reason we're saying like 50 is the new whatever they say. We've all figured out how to remain appearing more youthful. Like we've changed. We're not accepting that, you hit this age and then you've got to have like, the perm and whatever was.
If you think storyline wise, though, it's like the Golden Girls were still out there doing it. Like they were like Rose was dating. Like they were funny. They were funny. Irreverent.
They were
it's
like dimensional.
But the writing was genius. I mean, like at the end of the day, go watch a few more episodes. It's brilliant writing. And that's why we all love that show.
Yeah.
Yeah. How was the casting of the men for each one of their counterparts? It's like that cast was like, it's like, there's nothing you could like, this cast is incredible, of bringing them together. I can only fathom what it was like on set.
Yeah. Well, the casting process. So just going back to the first movie when obviously the same men mostly were there in the second one, but the original casting process was great and interesting. And again, we will not name names, but there are actors who we went to early on that absolutely categorically did not want to play their age, did not want to play opposite a woman their age. Excuse me. There's a certain
they didn't say that.
No, but like you get it.
Yeah.
They don't have to say it. You get it quickly. It's like they want to play opposite someone. They want to play opposite Jennifer Aniston. And I'm not picking on anyone, but like that's what their, the dynamic is. So for us too, we had a great relationship with the women, and part of it for us is like having worked again with an actor who'd been in the business for a long time. You don't know what the relationships that exist. You have to be very careful. Like you want people to be with people that they like, and so part of it was talking to the actors and saying to our women and saying like, who is there anyone that you particularly like, and so to their credit, I mean, Diane Keaton and Andy Garcia have an absolutely like amazing.
Andy Garcia approached us, right? Andy had seen her
he approached us after, I think, didn't they?
The thing is that you have to understand that nobody thought this movie was going to do anything. I mean, people literally thought this was the tiniest movie in the world. I had somebody tell me I'd be lucky if the movie made $1 million. Like zero belief. We made it on a tiny budget, and so the men, I mean, they had no idea that they were missing out on like a real, like a movie that was really going to hit. They had no idea. And Andy Garcia, I think, just loved Diane and like just respected her so much as an actress. And I think they saw each other at a awards show or something like that. And next thing you knew, his agent was calling us. And so what was so great after going through a bunch of people who basically had no interest in being in the movie, to then find someone that actually was motivated and like loved the script and loved Diane, and Diane liked him. It was like, oh my God, this was such a gift.
And Dawn and Jane, one of the things that we didn't know, like they'd been friends for 40 years. And both Dawn and Andy read the script before there was an offer and were like, can we meet? And to us, it's like, what a dream scenario is to like have actors like raise their hand and be like, and again, we really loved the idea of casting men that were younger than the women. Like we thought that was like a fun little turn after having a bunch of, a couple male actors be like, well, yeah, their agent be like, yeah, our client, doesn't really want to be perceived as that age.
Yeah.
It's like
John, we when we watched a bunch of his movies, we just wanted to like get a sense, and he's like actually an incredibly good actor. Like really, truly. So that was exciting. It wasn't just like, oh, Don Johnson, like great, he's in. He's real talent. So and then we felt lucky.
Yeah, and then but when we cast Mary, obviously she and Craig T. Nelson had worked together before in a couple different things. So that was a fun one for them to
coach. I mean,
yeah. I mean, they were the parents in The Proposal. I mean, how fun
I think
to
I was
get
like
them.
the most starstruck by Craig T. Nelson when he came to set. I don't know why, because I watched like 100 episodes of Parenthood. I was like, Zeke, where is he?
I would have been a bit about Coach for me, or like True Beverly Hills. Like I'm like 80s Craig T. Nelson all the way.
No, but I watched Parenthood very late in the game, so I was just like,
And then what was really fun is casting anyone opposite Candice Bergen, because you can get anybody. And so in the first movie, we talked to her about a couple people that she liked, and obviously Richard Dreyfuss and Wally Shawn were both,
A lot of them like basically worked for free. Like it was very they came because they're friends and
And in the new movie, in the sequel, Giancarlo Giannini, who's in Italian cinema, this is like he's
the most famous actor in Italy.
He is the Mount Rushmore of Italian cinema, but she and he and Candice worked together 40 years ago and like had a great relationship. So when you're calling someone like that saying, "Hey, we're coming to Italy, we need someone who's gonna play opposite Candice Bergen," it's like it just makes casting fun. Because you get yeses. Yeah. It's always fun. And then Hugh Corsi and Vince Riota, I mean, those guys they're such great actors. And it's fun to be able to go when you're overseas, to be able to pull from Europe and from the UK. And those were two great actors that we were able to grab from those places.
So, Bill, this was Book Club 1 was your directorial debut. What was that process like for you as you bridged between 1 and 2? What were the things that, you were nervous about? What were the pivots you had to make, or the things that you were just like, oh crap, how do I do this? Did you have those moments? It's like, and how'd you push through them?
You mean specifically from going from the debut in 1 to the second one?
Or even on the debut, going into the debut as well as from 1 to 2?
Yeah. I mean, I think what was interesting is the first movie, it was one of those, like, I really knew how to make a movie at that level. Like as a producer, I'd produced a bunch of movies at that level. Like I really understood the schedule and the days and it was really in my wheelhouse. And even though it was the first time that I was directing, it felt like oddly comfortable, because it was a size and scope and demographic, everything felt very natural because it was in that pocket. The big difference for the second one is now we're going to a foreign country. I've got a Italian speaking crew. We've got we're in a pandemic that's surging in a country that's very concerned because it was hit extremely hard. We've got actors that are, older and potentially more susceptible for that. So there's a safety, on baseline, there's a safety issue. We're going to be shooting in very public, very touristy places in a time that the world's reopening, and we don't actually know what that's going to mean. There's a war that has just broken out very not far. There's the attacking country we know very publicly has money and boats and things like that they're hiding in the country we're shooting. I mean, so those things, there was a bunch of like X factors that we didn't really know, what's going to happen. And so I think a lot of the concern was around the logistics of the production. And then there was things that we were doing that, like, we had a couple night shoots, in places like we had a night shoot in the Grand Canal in Venice. It's like, I didn't know how that was.
We didn't know Candice Bergen loves night shoot.
She
and
does
like
love
at 3 a.m, she's like wild. She's like a teenager. I mean,
that's a true
some surprises.
But I think like all those logistics, but at the end of the day, the thing that was extremely comforting is I had the same cast who on the first movie, we had a
Yeah.
great time. They really wanted to make the sequel, and they really became great friends. And that's a very comfortable thing when you already have that rapport going into day one with your cast, and that trust, and to their credit, like quickly in the first movie, the trust was really strong towards both Erin and I. And I think that only increased when we got to the second movie. So that was really great and super helpful. And obviously, Erin and I, our partnership, it's like, for us, there's nothing better than having someone who you can completely trust and completely trust you there. Because it's not easy filmmaking. I mean, this is not like, it's not for the faint of heart, and doing this in another country is not. It's like there's all sorts of like other logistical challenges. So that was really comforting. We got to bring back our DP from the first movie, which is really like was comforting. And
then we ended up discovering that the Italian crew was going to be the greatest crew that we had ever worked with.
Unbelievable. Like,
like everything you could imagine. They were
literally
basically like the fairy tale crew of like talent and personality, like their family. It was better than having an English crew. It was like we were in love with communication, everything. We'd be like, we need this, and they'd be like, easy, facile. Next thing you know, the guy's building, the Venice Villa, which every person has asked us, where's that restaurant? The one with the cooking school. How do we go there? I'm like, you can't, because he built that from scratch because he's a genius,
Yeah. I mean, it was. I will say, like, all of that was amazing. But for me too, because we write the scripts, and it's like the relationship with the material it's not the same as if you get a script and you're having to understand what's in between lines and what you're after. It's like it's baked in. So that's, I don't know.
The only thing I will say we learned about making a sequel, which will, next time we make a sequel to a great to a movie, is that it's a much more collaborative process. A lot more people have opinions. A lot more people think they know what it should be. And you definitely have to deal with a lot. Like we said, the first one was pure and it was just us and are just following the gut. I would not say that we were a sequel. You don't have that luxury. And that is why I think sequels are slightly more challenging, because a lot of people think they know why things went the way they did, and they want to. So we had to fight off some stuff on this one that was unexpected.
Were you intimidated to make the sequel?
Mm-hmm.
We didn't want to make. I mean, that sounds bad because it's like it's an absolute.
Something we didn't want. We never thought we were making a sequel.
And I think we were really apprehensive. We were so proud of what we did in the first movie, and we were really apprehensive to do anything that would in any way damage that legacy, if for lack of a better term. Like truly.
The first one was a miracle. We made it for like $2. It ended up being huge. Like it was one of those things you're like, let's not mess with that. Let's just like leave that.
Yeah. But once the idea once it became clear that there was a strong desire for it, and once we slowly wrapped our brains around it, I think, the thing that we really enjoyed in the first movie was those 17 pages where the women were all together at the book clubs. And so we decided like immediately, like whatever we're going to do in the sequel, I think it'd be really fun if all four of them are together the whole time and on the same journey, and not go and do and like, I don't know. Is that a great idea? Is it not a great idea? I don't know. It adds a whole other challenge from a production standpoint, because you have every day, everyone has a lot of dialogue and there's no off day. And every day you have to wrap on time, which we did in both movies, luckily. And we're really, really good about that production wise. But it's like, because those actors have to get home, get their rest, and because they're back on set the next morning. It's like no one gets a day off from the cast. And, and this cast, they're incredible. But this is 5 years after the first movie. And this is after a pandemic that had an effect on all of us. So it's like those things that we didn't really think through exactly.
No, but that's what made, so like originally not necessarily thinking we were making a sequel, and then slowly, like there was so much excitement and the women wanted to make it and the studio wanted to make it, and then slowly realizing like this is like becoming more and more grateful that we were going to get this opportunity, and getting more like the fact that we were going to maybe be going to Italy and having this experience. Like the experience was, it's like Seinfeld, it's like priceless.
Yeah.
You know, you can't put a price on what we went through, and it was so incredible. And as we shot, I just kept being more and more blown away by the women, going like, how are you even doing this? Like, I was so tired.
We also, I mean, it's summer in
Like,
Rome.
what are they doing?
It's like there were
the
day we shot at the Spanish Steps. It's 105 plus degrees. They're in like wool suits, and then I want to say it's like 1 week later, we're shooting a night shoot where we're literally in a field next to a road outside of Rome.
5 in the morning.
And like, but we have them like laying in the middle of a field.
Mary's in like a tank top. I don't know if you watch that scene. It was freezing.
Freezing. Like crew was like bundled in like down coats.
And
like,
I'm in like 50 coats going like, well, how are these women doing this without...
They're superheroes. They're genuinely.
It's not even that they're professionals. It's like obviously are, but they don't subscribe to the like complaining or I can't do it or I'm too old for this. They don't do that. And I don't know if they're just born that way or I don't know what it is, but they have an ambition and a drive that most people like, you know, it's like, you know, somebody said to me yesterday, like, oh, because my mom's still working, whatever. They're like, she shouldn't even be working anymore at her age. You know, that's what we're being told. That, like, you know, you hit the age and you shouldn't be doing stuff anymore. And that's what we were that was sort of the message of the movie. Like, no, you don't have to keep working, but like, you can keep doing whatever you want to do.
Yeah.
Really your call at how you talk to yourself. And you know, I think we all struggle with that. I even struggle with like, it's like, I'm not 20 anymore. I'm not there. It's like, you have to shake yourself out of that stuff. And so being around them and witnessing it for me was pretty wow a lot of the time, more than the first one.
Yeah. It's like even stuff that like I remember, at least from like a personal standpoint, like I remember being 20 and my mom would say something like, because she was 30 years older than me, she'd be like, I'm tired or I'm this and that. I'm like, why? Like, just be young, like just choose it. And now I'm like in my early 40s and I'm like, man, I'm tired. I just like want to go to bed. Like it's
I mean, I'm tired too, but
like you just push through it. And it's interesting to kind of see, you know, how our mind works and the, you know, subconscious thoughts around that kind of.
Well, yeah. And it's like you say you're tired, but the thing is that when you do something new, when you push yourself to do something risky, they got on the plane in the middle of a pandemic. You're not tired anymore. We're tired of our real lives. I don't want to go out to dinner. I'm exhausted. But when I was in Italy, I'll go anywhere. I'll do anything.
You have Wanderlust. Like, when Wanderlust comes in, you can go anywhere and find the energy, right?
Well, because I wanted to add, I mean, I'm literally just thinking back on that night shoot. And it's the scene where the stripper cop comes down the road. And now it's like 3 a.m, right? And like, but one of the things that is breathing so much life force into the group, because there they are, and they're still like, they are having a good time. They are laughing. They are having fun with the actor. They're having fun with each other. And I think the power of having these experiences with friends and that there's like a collective energy. It's like, we're tired on our own sometimes, but if we get around our friends, it's like all of a sudden it's like this rejuvenating, you know, reinvigorating sense of things. And I think because our cast were genuinely friends, I think sometimes on those dark moments of like a night shoot where it's like normally people could start to feel like, oh, this is hard and I'm tired, they were like there with their friends. And it became a slightly different experience where it's like, how do we make this, you know, it's like they start to have a little bit of fun with each other and that breathes a little bit of new oxygen into the room. And it's like, now all of a sudden it's like, it doesn't matter that it's the middle of the night. We're able to get that life and that energy and that fun quotient up, and we can go shoot a really fun scene because we have the benefit of them bringing the whole crew up because.
But by the way, it was they said I don't want to put words in their mouth, but I heard it enough times. They were also having an unexpected experience. Even Jane Fonda, who you think has literally done it all. No, she hadn't had this experience. She couldn't believe she was in Italy on the side of the road with a bunch of friends.
Right.
And they all felt that, and they all cried at the end because they knew they were having an experience that they never could have imagined that they were so grateful for, and for them was very unexpected at their age. It was like there was that thing happening at the same time as what we were making in the movie.
The other thing is, I mean, you mentioned how grateful we were, but like coming on the heels of the pandemic too, it's like no one knew if we were ever going to do anything again. And like that was something that, you really took stock in the experience of the activity and not just the results. And I think for us, it's like that experience, I don't know. I mean, it will go down. No matter what happens, it will be one of the great life experiences of our life. It was that.
Erin, one question for you. How is your process in getting it into writing? It's like, obviously this kind of came naturally to both of you. You were telling stories, but how is your transition into writing been for you?
It was like completely unexpected and not it's nothing that I planned at all. I was working at a company in Montreal where I was reading scripts all the time, and I'm reading. And then the guy was like, my boss was like, which ones do you think are the right ones? So it started out with me being like, oh, like I can tell this is good, this is not good. And then so that guy was making like sort of Lifetime-ish movies. And my friend was a writer, and I'm like, hey, by the way, like I'm reading the scripts. I'm telling my boss which one to make. Why don't I tell you what to write, and then you'll write it, and I'll act it. So I did that successfully, and then so I actually started more as like a side person, being like, this is good, this is not good, sort of like an editor, I guess would be.
Yeah.
And then when I moved and of course I'd been an actress, so I'd been reading scripts my whole life. So I didn't really think about that at the time. So then in LA, when I was reading all day long as a development executive, all you do is read scripts, books, articles, trying to think of story. And Bill was rewriting stuff, and he was rewriting A Walk in the Woods at that point. And I was just like, he was so funny, so good. And we just started to talk story. How do we make this script better? And so he was writing it. I wasn't writing it at all, but we were discussing all the story points. And suddenly it's like we came up with book club, and we were just sitting down and doing it and just talking through every story point. And so I've always come at it through like just talking story, talking character, talking what needs to happen. And I've always had we always say like, he's great at like getting down in the weeds and, with dialogue and, and I'm more of like the big picture of the story, because development is where
where your mind was,
where my mind is. I kind of see the whole picture, and then it's like, okay, in this scene we need, because at the end this is good. I don't know. It's just a good partnership. So it was accidental, I guess.
Well, last question.
Can I add to that though?
Yeah, absolutely.
Is that okay? Just because she's leaving one, like, I think really key thing out that I think she often dismisses of her own talent, which is she has a very strong musical background, and music is like, it's like baked into her DNA. And what Erin is better at than anyone I've ever met, actor, writer, producer, director, is the rhythm and feeling of the flow of dialogue and the music of language. And it's important in all film. Like, we don't talk about it a lot as writers or as creators. We don't talk about the music of the words and the way that we choose certain words for their musicality. And I think one of the things, and for a comedy, I think sometimes it's even more important, because the timing and that pace and that energy and where consonants hit, it's like, these are things that really matter. Very hard to learn, very hard to teach. But if you have it innately, it's super helpful. And so Erin has that in spades. And so when we're looking at a scene or at a script, like, she really has the sense of like the flow. Does this feel right? Are we getting to the next line at the right pace? It's like, and that rhythm and that music, it's like, that's a massive part, because it changes how people read. it also changes what you hear. And it's interesting in this business. You have the first layer of this as a writer is you have to be able to sell a script on a page with someone else's sort of mind's eye.
Yeah.
And if you can create something that feels like it has that rhythm and that pace and that read is good, like the reading, it's like that's layer one. And then if that can then translate into dialogue that feels natural but still, at pace, it's like that's part of two. And then I think where we're really probably both of our strengths align mostly is in post-production. It's like as an editing duo, it's like we really like that's where we really like I don't know, it's my favorite part. It always has been. And I think I don't know if it's your favorite part, but you're exceptional at it.
It's all the same. It's editing. It's like also if you're an actress, you know how to speak. And when reading, when you're reading a book and it's like choppy and you can't, it's like
focus.
Nora Ephron. You watch When Harry Met Sally, like every word is perfection. That isn't accidental. She just anyway.
But that is the talent. But that is the talent. And I think people talk about talent and what can be learned and what can't be learned.
Absolutely.
Just like a professional.
Be an amazing counterpart to each other. Yin and yang. But final question is, since this is the book club, what are you both reading right now?
Oh, I'm actually reading, if an audiobook counts.
It does.
It does.
Well, I just finished Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow. And now I'm reading Say Nothing, which is a true story. I wish I could remember the author, but a friend of ours, Chip, actually turned me on to it. And it's about the conflict in Ireland back in the day. It's like, I'm just getting into it, but it's freaking really intense and cool. It's really interesting.
I mean, I have a book right now over there called The Darlings that I just picked up at the airport. So I don't know what that's going to be. But when I'm feeling like I want to have a new idea or anything, I tend to read magazines. Like I'll read every word of every article, like a million things at once. So I love getting on a plane and just reading a jillion magazines.
Do you have you hit the point, because I'm a big magazine person, where it's like the magazine stores just don't satiate me anymore, because I used to leave at the stack, and now that magazines are all digital, I'm like,
oh no, I won't do digital. And by the way,
digital. I love the physical of getting on a plane with I just spent $60 on magazines and I'm going to do this.
100%.
I read so slowly. Erin reads probably 8 to 10 times. I read so slowly that to me, in any way to not see the pages read as a success, I would never get rid of those.
I think my struggle with a Kindle is I don't know how far in the book I am, and I'm I can't live this way. It doesn't resonate. I feeling it could be an 800-page book. It could be, I just need to know where I am in the book.
We do, by the way, we're analog when it comes to breaking story. We are, Erin has these beautiful,
which I got on the last page,
beautiful big books, and we literally, our whole outlines, all of the
every
history,
everything
are in these
there.
Oh, that's awesome.
So you can flip back and be like,
it's
my God, remember when Jane Fonda was a real estate agent and she was with her gay boy? So many different
stories. Amazing. I respect that heavily. It's big.
Yeah, it's fun. It's fun to have an archive.
Well, guys, thank you so much. It was such a pleasure to meet you. It's continued success your way.
Thank
you so much.
Thank you so much. It was great.
If you enjoyed this episode, subscribe and leave a review on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. To stay up to date with In Her Words, join the conversation by following Women in Entertainment on our social channels and subscribe to our weekly newsletter at womeninentertainment.com.